So if we now sum everything up, we get a grand total of, listen, building a custom bike is expensive. It's probably more expensive than you think, but it can also be one of the most rewarding things that you'll do in your life, especially when the day finally comes when you can roll it out of the shed and start it for the first time. I always wondered how much it would cost to build one of these nice custom bikes that you see on Instagram or Pinterest. Over the past 4 years, I have built one myself, and I can finally give you an answer to this question. To do that, I made a list of all of the parts I put on the bike and grouped them into different categories. So we're going to go through each of the categories, and in the end, I'm going to give you a total for the whole bike. And since I built the bike back in Germany, everything will be in euro. Let's start with one of the most expensive parts, but it's also one of the most fun parts, the exhaust. The one that I went with is the handcrafted 2-in-2 hot rod exhaust from Massmoto. It has cost me 980 euro, but I still think that it was worth every penny. It not only looks great, but also sounds amazing. And all of that while still being road legal in Germany, which is actually quite hard to do. You see why I'm saying it was worth every penny? While we go over the numbers, please keep in mind that my goal for the BMW build was to build it to the highest standard possible. You can definitely build a custom bike for less if you go with cheaper parts and have a similar experience. Initially, I thought expensive parts would automatically turn the BMW into a premium bike. But I quickly had to learn that that's not the case. What's a lot more important is how the parts are integrated into the bike. The true quality of a custom bike is in the handcrafted parts. And when it came to that, I started the project with zero knowledge and zero skills. So it took me a while to build up my skills until I was able to fabricate equally high quality parts. And since you're probably also thinking about building your first custom bike, I quickly want to share with you how I learned most of the skills that I needed for the BMW build. Fortunately, I found this online academy relatively early in the project, and those guys helped me out so much. The company is called HP Academy, and they're basically an online library that teaches people how to build race cars. But fortunately, a lot of the skills actually translate to custom bike building. So I took their 3D modeling course to make better prototypes. I learned the basics of fabrication and TIG welding through their courses. And later on in the project, I also bought their practical wiring course, which helped me a ton when it came to building a high quality wiring harness for the BMW. And since I learned so many of these valuable skills through them, I reached out and asked them if I could get something for you, because it has helped me a ton, and I'm sure that it will help you as well. They not only agreed to that, but they also became a partner of the channel, so the discount is actually crazy huge. If you go through the link in the description, you can buy any of their courses and get 55% off, which is crazy. I wish I had that deal when I started, because it makes it very, very easy to learn these high level skills to build a high quality bike. But now let's actually answer the question of how much one of these premium custom bikes would cost. For the fenders, I just bought 2 basic steel fenders, which I then adjusted to fit the bike. The front one was 50 euro, and in the rear I used half of a 155mm flat steel fender, which cost 67 euro. The other half of that fender I built myself. So the 2 raw fenders have cost me 117 euro. But as you'll see throughout the video, like the fenders, most of the other projects as well require some sort of raw material or different types of consumables or hardware like cleaners, grease, bolts, nuts. And since it's quite hard to attribute these costs of materials to each of the individual projects, what I'll do is I'll give you a rough total estimate for what I spent on materials, hardware and consumables later on in the video. Just keep in mind that you will almost always end up buying more than you will actually need, because 10 pieces of something most often cost as much as 100 pieces of something. Next up, we have the license plate bracket, which I built purely from 80 by 80 mm stainless steel square tubing. I spent €33 on a meter for that, but that would be in the materials category at the end. I decided to spend another 40 on this carbon fiber backplate. And then I also spent 20 on 2 license plate lights, mainly because I didn't know which one would fit better, so I bought 2. But buying parts twice is part of the process. Sometimes it's on purpose, like this, but when you start the project as your first one and you don't have a proper system to track all of your parts, it can happen that you buy too many things. That shouldn't happen, but to me it did. Halfway through the project, I sat down, went through all of the emails of the last 24 months to sort through the invoices and then list all of the parts and the prices and everything. From that learning, I started to develop and improve a system that will help me in the future to stay on track of my projects. And I'm finally at a point where the system is so easy that a 5-year-old could use it. I just made a video about that to show you how I use it for my Harley build. So if you want to watch that video and maybe copy the system for you as well, I'm going to link you the video down below in the description. So if we add everything up for the license plate bracket, we're gonna get €93. But to be fair, let's calculate with 50 for the carbon plate and one of the lights. In the next category, I have everything that I've spent on suspension. In the rear, I upgraded to all black YSS rear shocks, which cost €210. In the front, I did a bit more custom work. I took the front forks completely apart, and with the help of my friend, I made 2 stainless steel spacers that go in the forks to lower the stands in the front. When putting everything back together, I also did a complete rebuild on the forks, which cost me €110 just for the parts. With that, I also installed progressive fork springs from Wirt for $120. And then lastly, I wanted to give the front end a sleeker and more cohesive look. So I designed and fabricated a pair of fork sleeves that cover the upper part of the forks. I first 3D printed the prototypes, and then I could use my friend's lathe again to turn them from aluminum stock. And the fork gaiters, which cover the lower part of the forks, were €27 each. So in total, that is €554 that went into suspension upgrades. Next up, we have the tires and tubes. For the Scrambler look, I was looking for the right knobby tires, but it was actually quite hard to find proper knobby tires that met the legal requirements for the R80 in Germany. In the end, I went with the Heidenau K60s, and I'm very happy with these tires. Together they cost me $160, and I got the tubes at the workshop that also put them on. They charged me €80 for installing both tires, including the tubes. So that's €240 for the tires. Let's continue with the lights. So headlight, rear light, brake light, and indicators. The headlight was actually relatively cheap with €44 off eBay. And in the rear, I really wanted to have 3-in-1 indicators. So indicators that combine rear light, brake light, and indicators. And I think I found a pretty good deal with these because they were $62 for the 2 of them. And then we're only left with the indicators for the front. And here I went with some of the most high quality indicators that you can find on the market. These are produced by Motor Gadget in Germany, and they're called Moblaze Disc. Each one of them costs €99, so together it's 198, which to be honest is quite a lot for 2 indicators. But Motor Gadget parts are all such high quality parts, and I feel like if you're going for premium, then Motor Gadget is definitely the way to go. But as I said earlier, if you want to just build a bike, you can definitely build a bike for less if you go with cheaper alternatives. In the end, I spent €304 for lights, and more than half of that was for the front indicators. By the way, if you want to get a detailed overview of all of the parts that went into building the BMW, you can get my build sheet through the link in the description. It has all of the parts, links, prices, everything that you need in order to build a bike like this for yourself. All right, let's move on. The next category is the speedometer. On the BMW, I went with the Daytona Velona 2. It's again one of the more premium speedometers on the market. But in my opinion, with this one, you actually get an excellent value for money ratio. At €150, I feel like it wasn't overpriced for how small and high quality it is. However, you still need a different speed sensor, which costs another 56, so it's €206 for the speedometer in total. And while all of these high quality parts seem super nice, they were actually a curse and a blessing at the same time, because on the one hand they are the key to building a high quality premium custom bike, but on the other hand it also put me under a lot of pressure, because if your fabrication isn't on the same level, it definitely shows. Let's move on to the next category, which is the whole handlebar setup. In here we have the steel handlebar for €35, but only after I spent 65 on an aluminum one, just to notice that the inner diameter is too small for the bar and indicators. Then we also have the grips, the Tomaselli throttle body, the clutch lever, all of the parts that are used to make the custom control cables, which were about €200, but these will probably also last me for 3 more bikes, so let's go with 50. And then we have even more high quality premium Moto Gadget parts. These simple black buttons were €182, and then the glassless mirrors, €184. So that brings us to a total of €565 for the whole handlebar setup, not counting the new front brake setup, which we're going to get to right now. On the R80, the stock front brake master cylinder sits underneath the tank, which is actually quite a smart idea because it cleans up the handlebar a lot. But there are 2 problems. On the one hand, they're prone to leak, and on the other hand, we need that space to hide all the new electronic parts, which we'll get to in just a second. So to make that room, I upgraded to a new Brembo front brake master cylinder, which cost €125, and the reservoir was €23, including the tubes and the clips. Since the stock brake lines didn't fit anymore, I also upgraded to stainless steel ones, which cost me €128. If you want to know how to measure and customize your own stainless steel braided brake lines, or how I did anything else on the bike, I literally made videos or tutorials about every step along the way. I'm gonna link you the full BMW playlist down below so you can browse through and find whatever you're interested in. For the brakes, I also rebuilt the 2 front calipers, and at the same time I changed the brake pads, which came out to €82. I also got new pads for the drum brake in the back, which were an additional $50. So that brings us to a total of €408 for the brakes, and again, I'm not counting brake fluid or consumables like that because we're gonna add that up later. In the next category, we have all the electrical components. I upgraded the ignition and charging system to a completely new one from a company called Vape. That was €538. I also upgraded the battery to a very small lithium-ion battery, which is amazing because I could simply hide it underneath the seat and thereby clean up the whole frame triangle a lot. That came in at €165. However, getting the lithium-ion battery meant that I had to change a few other things. I first had to get a compatible regulator rectifier, which was another €94, and then it still didn't work out when I first tried to fire up the bike. The first start immediately fried the battery, and that happened because on the older BMW models, BMW still use Bosch starter motors, which turn over quite slowly, and they require a lot of cranking power from the battery, which this small new one just couldn't deliver. So I first had to get it repaired for €35, and then also install a newer generation starter motor, which turns over much easier. The new Valeo starter motor cost me another €189, but at least the bike started. No way! And then as one of the last electronic components, we have the Mo unit from Moto Gadget. It's this small device that collects and manages all the wiring in one spot. It honestly makes wiring so easy. With €400, it's not cheap, but in my opinion, it's absolutely worth it. I also installed a Mo button, which basically collects all of the signals from your buttons and transmits them to the M unit with just one wire. Now, for the electrical components, I spent €1,546, including small stuff like fuses and things like that. But the thing is, that's not all that you need to spend in order to build a high-quality wiring harness. A high-quality wiring harness actually needs a lot of supplies. Wires, sleeves, plugs, connectors, and tools. And if you want to build a high-quality wiring harness that doesn't go up in flames, it can get quite expensive. In total, I spent €1,234 on wiring supplies. To be fair, all of the wiring supplies will probably last me for 2 more bikes. If you plan to build more than one bike, you can probably calculate anywhere from 300 to 400 for wiring supplies. And then, as one of the last tasks for the BMW build, I tackled the engine. When I bought the bike in December of 2020, I had the misconception that buying a running bike meant that I wouldn't have to touch the engine. However, the project showed me that that is almost never the case. If you have an old bike with 100,000 kilometers on the clock, it's always smart to check the engine. And if you check, you'll definitely find things that need to be done. The cylinders needed to be honed, the valves needed to be cleaned, I had to exchange the pushrod tubes, the timing chain had to be exchanged, I also needed to clean the carbs, and when you do that, it makes sense to rebuild them properly. So for engine maintenance and repairs, I spent 1,152 euro in the end. And if I had budgeted a little better with all of the other parts, I would have liked to install a big bore kit from Siebenrock. The good thing about those things is that you not only get the increased performance, but you also get new parts, so new cylinders and new pistons, which, as you can see, with these old bikes is never a bad idea to have. But with how much I already had spent on all of the other parts, that unfortunately wasn't an option anymore. Now let's move on to the seat before we talk about paint. After I had built the seat plate from aluminum, I wanted to get it professionally upholstered. And to get the perfect fit, I built a 100% accurate wireframe template. So with that, I gave it to the upholsterer. And I have to say, the upholsterer did an absolutely amazing job. The seat came out exactly how I wanted it and only cost me 230 euro, which I think is pretty fair for how well it turned out. Now, moving on, we have one of the last very big categories, and that is paint. I really wanted to keep the original bright blue color of the tank. It's such an iconic color for the airheads, and since the tank was in relatively good condition, I decided to only patch up the one spot that needed repair. Paint was definitely one of the things that surprised me, because just patching that up cost 392 euro. Most of the other parts I had either powder coated or Cerakoted. If I could go back, I would just go for powder coat with everything. Cerakote is nice because it's very durable and super thin, but since it's so thin, it also requires a lot of surface prep, a lot more than powder coat. And in the end, you can definitely see a slight difference between the two colors, so I wouldn't mix and match. And since Cerakote is about twice the price of powder coat, I would just go with powder coat for everything. I paid 840 euro for powder coat, and with the 392 for the gas tank, that is a total of 1,232 euro for paint in general. Now in the last main part category, we have all of the miscellaneous things like the handlebar lock, stuff like that. That came out to 150 euro. But then we have a few more things, as I said before, that were more in general for the overall project. We have material. For all of the material, I spent probably 500 euro. It most often makes sense to buy a big bar of aluminum or a big plate of sheet metal, because compared to how much more you get, those are hardly more expensive. And it's also nice to have that at hand, because in case you mess up the first try, you can go back, cut up a new piece and start over again, instead of having to wait 3 days until your second super expensive tiny piece of material arrives. Then we have hardware. Here it's the same thing. I paid 300 euro for all of the bolts and nuts and washers, stuff like that. But again, that probably lasts me for like 5 more bikes. And then we have another of these categories that actually surprised me a bit. I paid 300 euro just in shipping fees. I mean, you can't do anything about it, but it was more than I expected. Another category that was definitely higher than I expected was the state inspection. In Germany, everything needs to be inspected on customized bikes, so it gets pretty expensive. In the end, I paid 450 euro to get the BMW road legal and everything approved. That is crazy. That's something I really enjoy now about the state of Virginia. Here you pay $12, and it doesn't matter if it's a stock Sportster or a highly customized one like that one. You always pay $12 and you're good to go. Now, in all of these calculations, we are still missing one of the main and the biggest spending of all, and that is the base bike. I bought the bike back in 2020, as I said, and since I wanted to have a running bike, because, you know, I started with 0 skills and I didn't really trust my abilities to repair a non-running bike, I went with the trade-off of paying a little bit more, but getting a bike that already works. And I still think that that is actually a good approach for the first bike, but I also didn't see a few things when I test rode the bike, so I probably overspent a little bit. When I looked at bikes, the lowest end was like 2,300 or something like that for like very shitty non-running bikes. And then once you wanted to have a running bike, it quickly went up to like 4K. I also wanted one that wasn't in the worst shape, so I spent close to 5,000 for the base bike. So if we now sum everything up, we get a grand total of 15,800 euro. And I probably forgot one or two things, so let's say 16K for a bike like this. And that doesn't count the hundreds of hours or all of the tools that you need in order to build a bike like this. What I definitely learned from my first project is that all of the flashy parts like indicators and exhaust shouldn't make up the majority of your budget. It should actually be quite a small part. Maybe 25%. There are so many expenses that come down the line that aren't super flashy, like maintaining and repairing the engine, patching the paint, things like that, like all of the small stuff that I, in the beginning, definitely didn't account for, and in the end led to me overspending a little bit on this project. But now you know, and maybe you can keep that in mind. And with that being said, I hope that this video doesn't discourage you from building a bike, but actually encourages you, because no matter how much you spend on a project, it will be one of the best things that you can do in your life. Definitely challenging at times, but it's the best feeling when you roll that bike out of the shed and start it for the first time and go for the first ride. Just know that you might not be able to stop after the first one, but who said that that is a bad thing?